מזמור לדוד, אדוני רואי לא אחסר, בינות דשא ירביצני, על מי מנוחות ינהלני. נפשי ישובב, ינחני, ומעגלי צדק למען שמו. גם כי אלך בגיא צל מוות, לא אירא רע, כי אתה עמדי. שבטך ומשענתך המה ינחמוני. תערוך לפני שולחן נגד צורריי, דשנת ושמן ראשי, כוסי רוויה. אך טוב וחסד ירדפוני כל ימי חיי, ושבתי בבית אדוני לאורך ימים.
Tehillim, Psalm of David, chapter 23. A song of David. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He causes me to lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside still waters. He restores my soul. He leads me in the paths of righteousness for his name's sake. Even when I walk in the valley of darkness, I will not fear evil, for you are with me. Your rod and your staff, they'll comfort me. You set a table before me in the presence of my adversaries. You anointed my head with oil, my cup overflows. May only goodness and kindness pursue me all the days of my life, and I will dwell in the house of the Lord for length of days. Today, we gathered here with great sadness and profound respect to say goodbye to George Nashen, to Yisroel ben Avram. If I'm not here for your 50th birthday, Moshe, let me wish you a happy birthday now. Those were among the last words that I heard from my friend George. You see, to many of us, George was a man of greatness, a man who may possibly have won the world record for longest and most impressive eulogy. To me, that is wonderful, but it's not what made George truly great. A great man is the one who thinks about others. A man who on his deathbed, with only a few hours left, and he knew it, can remember to wish his friend a happy birthday. This is true greatness. There's a special passage in the Ethics of Our Fathers, written by the Talmudists almost 1,800 years ago. Often, when I read this passage, I think of George. It says, "Who is wise? He who learns from all. Who is mighty? He who subdues his passions. Who is rich? He who is happy with their lot. And who is honored? He that honors his fellow." Dear George, today I stand before you humbled in the presence of a man who is truly wise, truly mighty, truly rich, and truly honored. I met George and Phyllis in 1993. My mother and I were recent immigrants from the former Soviet Union. My English is far from perfect now, but let's just say it was next to nil at that time. We came to Canada with not much more than the shirts on our back. The Jewish community paired us up with local families for Rosh Hashanah, which is coming up in a few days. My mother and I were lucky recipients of a Rosh Hashanah dinner invitation from Phyllis and George. And as they say here in Canada, the rest is history. Talk about divine providence, of what some call serendipity. Who would imagine that a young immigrant at your Rosh Hashanah table so many years ago would be studying here as a rabbi, nonetheless speaking English? George, you may have many merits, but lifting the spirits of an immigrant family and helping them adjust in a foreign environment, to me, makes you a hero. Shlomo HaMelech, King Solomon, once said that we go to a funeral, in his words, "B'mokim sheli b'chafetz." I'll translate that into original Hebrew, so that the living take it to heart. So as we mourn George today, as I mourn my friend George, I think of life. We think of life. What is a meaningful life? What is a happy life? Many books have been written, studies performed with patients in palliative care, discussing with them now, with the benefit of hindsight, what are their greatest accomplishments, their greatest regrets? What was the real meaning of their lives? Overwhelmingly, the answer is quite simple. People don't wish they worked more and made more money or anything like that. The number one value that emerges with the valuable perspective that comes with one's imminent mortality in mind is the value of relationships. If relationships are life's greatest value, then I must say George was a billionaire. For me, as a still relatively young rabbi, I'm simply in awe of George. He lived in a world, today we live in a world of social media, Facebook friends, people who come and go in and out of our lives. But life is so hectic. There's so much work. People move away, and there are so many demands from my own children and community. How can I make time for them? George did not let any of that stop him. He knew what mattered. If I'm not here for your 50th birthday, Moshe, let me wish you a happy birthday now. I think of those words echoing in my mind. Before I conclude, I would like to share a story that my mother and I share often. Some of you may remember the infamous ice storm of 1998. Others of us who lived through it can't forget it. Phyllis and George graciously invited my mother to join them in their home in Florida. At that time, she had never been to Florida as a recent immigrant to Canada from Europe. Though their invitation was generous, at the time, it would not materialize without an airplane ticket to travel there. So they bought her a ticket as well. Unbeknownst to them, her flight was one of the last ones, if not the last one, to take off from Trudeau before flights were all grounded for well over a week due to the storm. That allowed my mother to have the good fortune, or as we say, mazel, of not having to weather the storm here in Montreal. And I just wanted to mention that none of what George did in his lifetime, especially in the last 71 years, would be possible without Phyllis, his life partner and devoted wife of 71 years, exactly to the day. 71 years. And she gets 50% of the credit. But the reward and the value of a mitzvah, which means a good deed, is infinite. So 50% of infinity is a lot. It's still a lot. I share this with you because often I find myself doing things for others, thinking, it's no big deal. How hard was it already? It took a few minutes. Maybe a phone call to a friend or a colleague. What may seem easy for us makes the world of a difference for those we help. For example, after 30 years, my home country and even my hometown is back in the news. Once again, we need to help our brothers and sisters in Ukraine. Today in my work, I try to implement the life lessons that my friend George taught me. Be there for others in their time of need. Don't ask questions, just give. Value relationships like gold. Invite to your Rosh Hashanah or Shabbos dinner without even thinking twice. Today is a great Jewish holiday. It's called Chai Elul, the 18th day of the Hebrew months of Elul. Two great and legendary Jewish sages, saints, and leaders were born on this very date, hundreds of years ago and many years apart. The Baal Shem Tov, the founder of the entire Hasidic movement, was born today. And the Alter Rebbe, the founder of the Chabad Hasidic movement, was born today, as we say goodbye to George today. George, I wish your soul will soar to the highest heights and join their souls together with the souls of all your ancestors. Some of them were Bayaner Hasidim that you were so proud to come from. George, I will miss you, my friend, and you will always be my hero. My dear George, your memory will always guide me and serve as a blessing to myself and my family. Shalom, my friend. Now we will hear from George's grandchildren, who will introduce themselves to you. They will be followed by his sons, represented today by Barry first, and then by Glenn.
I'm Nikki. This is Jeremy, Natalie, Danielle, Jordan, Michael, Blair, Corey. So you've probably never heard me speak at a Nashen function before. And for that matter, you've probably never heard any of us speak. That's because Zeta spoke so much that none of us ever got an opportunity to. So Zeta, now it's your turn to listen to us and hear about how much we love you. When we were younger, Bubs and Zeta would often babysit me, Natalie, and Jeremy. Zeta would try to teach us as many life lessons as we would listen to. And then we would all sit on the floor and play the Jenga set that they kept in the tin box in the closet. When Bubs decided it was Zeta's turn to cook, he would make us his specialty, fried mac and cheese. It consisted of Kraft dinner fried in a pan with butter, and Zeta always made it with the perfect level of crispiness. Zeta, on Monday night, Natalie made us fried mac and cheese. It definitely doesn't compare to how you used to make it for us, but it brought back so many amazing memories of you. Some of our best winters were spent in Lyndhurst H in Century Village. How we all fit in that one-bedroom apartment, I will never understand. If you ask any of the grandchildren, our favorite sound in the world is the sound of our suitcases clicking on the outdoor hallway between the elevator and Bubs and Zeta's condo. It meant that it was the start of a fun week with Bubs and Zeta. Some of our fondest memories are when everyone jumped into bed with Bubs and Zeta and they would tell us stories. Passover was always the Mackles' favorite holiday because it meant that the whole family was getting together to sing all of the Passover songs with Zeta. Everyone knows that Chad Gadya is Bubs' solo. But Zeta would always need a little reminder. Zeta would say, "Abin uppa beat re Suze," and everyone would have to scream, "Chup!" to indicate to Zeta that he better stop singing because he was about to steal Bubs' solo. Getting emails from Zeta was always a treat. We would always tell him that many of them had spam links, but that didn't stop him from flooding our inboxes with news, inspirational stories, and the occasional Zeta joke. As much as we complained about the emails when we got them, we sure will miss them now that we won't get them anymore. Although, Zeta, I'm sure that once you're done listening to these speeches, you'll go continue catching up on some more emails. For Bubs and Zeta's combined 185th birthday, we threw them a cruise theme party. When we were organizing the Newlywed Game, we asked Bubs and Zeta what song they walked down the aisle to. Immediately, they both answered in harmony, "Because of You." But then we asked who the artist was, and that's when the controversy started. Zeta immediately said Frank Sinatra, and Bubs said Tony Bennett. As I'm sure you all know, Zeta usually remembered everything in perfect detail. But Bubs was very certain about Tony Bennett, so we decided to Google it. Much to Zeta's surprise, and honestly to all of ours also, Frank Sinatra in fact does not sing a song called "Because of You." Good job, Bubs. On Sunday, Natalie and Jeremy and I were fortunate enough to be able to visit Zeta in the hospital. Zeta told us that we didn't need to say goodbye to him. He pointed to his head to indicate to us that even when he's no longer here, he would be with us forever. Zeta told us that he was so proud of us, and he told us to continue impressing him. I told Zeta that he's impacted our lives in so many ways, and that as each of us continues along our life's journey, he'll continue to impact us in ways that we don't even know possible right now. Zeta always used to tell us that he loved us all the way around the world. Zeta, we love you all the way around the world and to wherever it is that you're watching over from us from now.
Good. When I tried to reach my Zeta on Sunday to speak to him, I FaceTimed my mom. She was at the hospital. And I said, "Can I speak to Zeta?" And she said, "He's busy." What do you mean he's busy? What could he be doing? He's on the phone with the rabbi arranging his own funeral. Stubborn and controlling until the end. Very on brand for him. You can laugh if you find something funny. He'd be very happy with that. One of my favorite things about my relationship with Zeta is that we're birthday twins. On June 23rd, 33 years ago, he got a call from my mom telling him she didn't know what to get him for his birthday because he already has everything. So she decided to get him another granddaughter. We spent nearly every birthday together since. Well, the last few had to be spent over Zoom. We were fortunate enough to spend his 99th together a few months ago. It's almost selfish to want any more time with him when he lives such a happy and fulfilling life. But we share the best memories with him, and I have to admit, I am bummed that we are going to miss his 100th, since he already stated he wanted dancers there. Boy, would that have been a rager of the century, literally. 5 years ago, we were all on pins and needles when he had a health scare and wasn't sure he was going to make it to mine and my husband's wedding. His goal that whole year was not only to make it to the wedding, but to walk down the aisle, walker-free, and dance with me. Not only did he make it down the aisle, sans walker, with the help of Nikki and Tally, he almost made the whole wedding late because I carefully selected Because of You by Tony Bennett for their processional song, and he was too busy dancing with Bubs to realize that it was his turn to walk down the aisle. Not only did he make it down the aisle in 2018, and we had our special dance, but 4 years later, he got to witness 3 more grandchildren get married. At my brother Jordan and Carmel's wedding a few months ago, surrounded by his entire family with tears in his eyes, Zeta wrapped his arms around me, hoisted himself up out of his wheelchair, and over the music in my ear, he said, "We're doing it again, Danny." I said, "Doing what, Zeta?" He smiled and said, "Dancing." Zeta was a stoic, but still somewhat affectionate man. He mainly reserved his affection towards his family and close friends and loved ones, but exclusively towards humans. He wasn't what you would call an animal lover. But after 95 years, it finally took a 17-pound ball of fluff named Peanut to chip away at his hard exterior and turn him on to dogs. Well, just one dog. I know this sounds unbelievable, and even my cousins and my uncles did not believe me when I told them that he loved, tolerated Peanut. But I have photographic evidence. Come find me later if you don't believe me. The last thing he said to me was to always take care of my husband, Matt. I've heard him say the same thing to my father about my mom, and to his other sons and grandchildren about their partners. He always led by example. And I know he could be a pain in the butt sometimes, Bubs, but he loved you so much. And he never failed to show us how much he loved you. 71 years after you were married, he still called you his bride. I hope we can all be as lucky to share the overwhelming amount of love that you two had together for as long as you did. I love you.
Stubborn. Thank you. No, Zeta, he was both a man of few words and far too many, and many more. Often he decided to command a room, and today's no different. I want to share a couple of memories that we have from him from the many years we were able to share together. Blair always remembered making sure he had a good stiff drink with him, pouring a screwdriver and having it ready before he'd arrive. Corey recalls several years ago when he had moved over to London for several years that Zeta, the original hipster, was there first. He spent some time during the war stationed in London, and he was the ergo chief captain, knowledge base extraordinaire of how to exist in London in 1940. And some things don't change, and I'm sure a couple things may have, but he was ergo taking care of everything for him there. I remember him as always, whether wanted or not, it was always time to learn a lesson. And I recall, I think I was about 11 years old, visiting in Florida, hearing the click-clacks. We were planning, he surprised me for the trip down to Cape Canaveral, and it was late in the evening, and he put down a table full of maps for the app. And he says, "This is where we are. We're going here. I'm waking up at 5 a.m. you're navigating, and then he went to sleep. A very scenic drive later, we arrived the next morning without a problem, I think so at least, and he always knew that it was time to learn a lesson. Again, whether you wanted it or not, it was time to learn it. It's said that one dies twice. Once when your heart stops, and a second time when the last person stops thinking about you. So the next time you're pouring a drink, pour out little one for Zeta. The next time you're traveling somewhere, and just remember, he was there first. He knows better than you do. And the next time you get lost, you should have known better. Zeta was very loving, and as I think Danielle said, stoic. He stern, straightforward, but he always had his own alter ego or alternative motive for what he was trying to get across, and he always had a bigger plan. And whether it was true or not, he knew better. At the same time, he was always loving and caring, and loved Bubs very much, and always took good care of her, and always put her first, even when it wasn't directly outwardly showing. The back of his head was always looking straight at you. So, let today not be the last time we think of him, and our hearts go out.
More than anything, this gathering is truly a celebration of life. Big Gino, aka Zeta George, aka Zeta, lived as full of a life as one can get, outlasting the greats that came before him, including the Queen. The patriarch of the Nashen family, King George's ability to live life every day with a sense of purpose and passion was absolutely remarkable. While his stubbornness certainly caused for some chaos, it also kept us with him for far longer than it should have. He defied everything from modern medicine to the laws of reality as a whole. And because of that, he really had more lives than a cat. As the patriarch, Zeta was a polarizing figure. Sometimes he spoke so often that he could have been confused as the matriarch as well. Although Bubs, aka Bubbles, aka Bubby freaking Phyllis, when she speaks, she also has the ability to steal the room, and when she does, he always watched with a smile. Thanks in large part to Patricia, he was recently able to share so many memories with us, including Carmel and my wedding, where he, of course, naturally managed to co-steal the show with Carmel. He was on bonus life, and we were all able to take full advantage of that, which we did. 99 is a tough number to associate with. While Wayne Gretzky was the greatest to wear that number on his jersey, Big Gino was up there on the list of those hitting that number in age. Zeta was the best at maximizing his minutes, and for that we are so grateful to now be able to celebrate a life that was truly fully lived.
When a man or a woman lives to 99 years and then passes in their 100th, it seems to me that we should be celebrating their life and not mourning their loss. Wouldn't you agree? In keeping with the spirit of this theme, I have a couple of stories to share. I can assure you, nobody living on earth today knows what I'm about to say. You'll have to take my word for it. My father was a strict disciplinarian when we were kids. And my brothers and I all dreaded those words, "Wait till your father gets home." When I was 5, I had done some dastardly deed that deserved punishing. I can't remember what. I know it was a Friday evening because my Zeta, my father's father, was over for dinner. And I figured I might be able to avoid getting spanked, which was typical in those days, or punished, if I ran around the house like a crazy kid, crying his eyes out, found my grandfather, and hid behind him, acting as though I was going to get the living hell beat out of me. And my grandfather, my Zeta, bought that theatrics hook, line, and sinker. And when my father caught up with us, his father commanded him to back off. And only then did I realize that although my father ruled with an iron fist in our home, he was king of the castle, but his father was king of the realm. Now, do you think my dad waited for the next day to mete out some punishment or to get even with a battle lost? No. A word was never spoken about it, and a lesson learned. A couple years later, there was a huge tree at the end of my street and 1 block over. It might have been 100 feet high and 100 years old. And the bigger kids on the block built a tree house by borrowing planks of wood from the different houses under construction in the neighborhood. When my father learned about this, one Saturday morning, he walked down to the end of the block with a hammer and climbed 30 or 40 feet up to where sat what I'll call a treehouse. I didn't know fathers could climb trees. And began to pry apart the boards nailed into the huge branches. I was down below, most upset, because he was destroying a great source of pleasure and adventure. And out of anger, I wanted to yell up at him, and out of fear, I could only whisper. But these are the words that came out of my mouth. "I hope you break your bones." I had no sooner said it, I felt ashamed that I was so disrespectful to my own father. 70 years later, I look back as though through a time telescope, like it was yesterday, and I see my 7-year-old self looking up. "I hope you break your bones." I was never so ashamed. My father looked down from his perch and said, "Go home. I'll see you there later." And he finished dismantling the treehouse. He never brought it up. He never said a word. And I never disrespected my father again. not in my rebellious teenage years, not in my early adult years, nor in any of the decades that followed. I couldn't bear the shame a second time. Now, it'd be easy for me to proclaim here on my perch this morning that I had the best father in the world. And that may be true. But with certainty, I can tell you all that he was the most honorable and fair-minded father a son could have, and maybe the most wise too.
My father's story is one of immigration, hard work, service to Canada and its allies, romance, travel, family, and friends. My father was the grandson of a Hasidic rabbi and the son of revolutionary Russians. Born in Kishinev, Romania in 1923, he arrived in Montreal before his first birthday. Dad graduated from Baron Byng High School in the famous class of 1939. He and his classmates reunited annually, almost to their 80th reunion. His studies in accounting were interrupted by the outbreak of World War II. My dad enlisted in the Royal Canadian Air Force and spent the next 3.5 years deployed overseas, mostly stationed in London, England. He had hoped to be a pilot, but colorblindness changed those plans, and instead, he worked in the payroll division of the General Accounting Office, headquartered in Harrods of London. We joked that tucked away, deep in the back of the 3rd floor, my dad spent World War II serving in women's lingerie. Instead of flying as a pilot, he paid them every 2 weeks. He endured the bombardments, blackouts, air raids, and hardship of everyday life in London, but fortunately was safe, in contrast to so many of his close buddies who never returned home from the front lines. He told us that one of the worst days of his life was when a children's hospital took a direct hit from aerial bombardment. He and his buddies rushed to help with the rescue effort, but there was nothing that they could do. That pain stayed with him ever since. He formed unbreakable bonds with his Air Force buddies, and one particular young woman, a dear relationship that would eventually extend to her husband, children, grandchildren, and our entire family, and last to this day, 80 years later. On a boys' weekend to Cape Cod in 1948, my dad's luck ran out. Or did it? His car broke down, stranding him for a couple of days in Boston. All alone, he reached for the crumpled phone number that his father had pressed into his hand back in Montreal, courtesy of a family friend, the uncle of an American girl. Not knowing anyone and with nothing to do, Dad made the call, and so began his great romance with Phyllis. They were married in 1951. After returning from military service, he began working for Richter and Usher Accountants. He then joined his uncle in business and became an important manufacturer of shirts and jeans for more than 35 years. My father set up Nash Shirt Limited, his factory in Saint Leonard d'Aston, employing more than 200 employees, over 10% of the town. Nearly every family in the area was touched by his business operations, and this community of hard workers outfitted Canada for many years with police uniform shirts and denim for workers, and later for teens craving the new fashion. He was so proud to have his boys join him in business, and I was always impressed by the huge number of people he developed relationships with, employees, customers, suppliers, and townsfolk. I am so touched to see that just yesterday, the local newspaper covering Saint Leonard d'Aston posted a story about my father's passing. Phyllis and George built our home and family in Côte Saint-Luc and helped build the community and its institutions. My dad was active on numerous boards and committees. They were so fortunate to be able to raise their 4 sons and watch all 8 grandchildren flourish in Montreal. We were one of 2 families with 4 boys at JPPS at that time. And my dad recounted his meeting with Principal Jacob Zipper way back when he said to my dad, "Your 5th son will be schooled free of charge." Sports were a big part of my dad's life. Golf and tennis past 90 years old, bowling too, squash and badminton for decades, and much more. Weekends at the Blossom Pool were more like family resort vacations. My dad loved to plan family vacations, and he seemed as excited as we were. Life on Cork Avenue was sensational. My mom and dad befriended the whole neighborhood, but their special connection to a couple of the neighbors was rock solid and would last a lifetime. And I see you here today. You know who you are. Our summers at Nantasket Beach with our Schertzer family were legendary, and Dad managed to drive us all the way down there before the interstates were built, drive back to Montreal to work for a couple of weeks, and come right back to spend fun time on the hot sand and the very cold water, leading up to our Labor Day grandiose departures. And I'm excited to see our Schertzer cousins here from Boston and across the States today. My mom and dad eventually bought a home in the Laurentians, and we enjoyed our family leisure time together there, a tradition that continues almost 50 years later and hopefully will for generations. My father and his cousins created the Nashen family circle, and together we celebrated Jewish holidays and sunny summer outings with dozens of relatives. Our NFC, Nashen Family Circle Passover Seders, became a highlight on the calendar, singing and kibitzing with grandparents, distant cousins, great aunts, and uncles. And in 2020, we had more than 120 Nashens around the table. Talk about family planning. My dad had foresight and vision in all aspects of life, and so many of you here and watching online know from your own stories and encounters with George. My mother and father were very fortunate to have visited over 40 countries and enjoy wonderful memories of travel and meeting people all around the world. They spent more than 30 winters in Florida and were unbelievably active. They attended courses and performances and dinners and endless social activities. My dad was particularly proud of his membership at the Côte St. Luc Men's Club, the camaraderie of his many friends, and everyone knew that George would be the first at the microphone to ask the speaker a question, or 2, or 3. He so enjoyed meeting up with the boys, all of them in their 80s and 90s, at his Friday breakfast club, even during these past years when he couldn't actually eat and when they couldn't actually meet in person. In 2020, George was presented with the Darcy McGee Quebec National Assembly Citizenship Medal and recognized for outstanding achievement in community involvement, an initiative or a member of the National Assembly, David Birnbaum, who's here with us today. The honor was presented by one of Canada's finest military icons, Lieutenant General Romeo Dallaire, who said to my dad, "You permitted peace to reign. You are one of our greatest soldiers, one of our greatest elders. Well done, sir. I salute you. The medal is well deserved." My father insisted that he accepted the award on behalf of all veterans. Just this past Monday night, the City of Côte St. Luc Council paid tribute to the Queen and to my father. I thank the Mayor, who's sitting with us here today, and to members of Council, who I see here as well. And I also thank our member of the National Assembly, who's here, and our Member of Parliament, Anthony Housefather, who just on Monday had sent over a certificate from the House of Commons recognizing my parents for their 71st wedding anniversary. My dad simply loved connecting with all sorts of people. At every restaurant, he would grill the waiter as to their background, and most often, he would have been familiar with their country of origin, having traveled so extensively. Then he'd tell them he wanted his soup really, really hot. Double boiled, he would say, or he would send it right back. He'd sit down with every one of our friends and ask, who were the parents? Who were the grandparents? And usually, he'd know one of them. I became used to being stopped in airports and asked if I was a Nashen, as my face reminded them of my father. Growing up, it seemed to me that the whole world knew my father, and it's something wonderful to say about him. His memory was not just sharp, it was extraordinary. He remembered details, large and small. He used his brain, not a calculator. No interest or time for gossip. He knew facts, mostly firsthand, about people and places. When he told us a story from long ago, my brothers and I would sarcastically retort, "Was it raining?" He knew it all. If only he had appeared on Jeopardy, which he watched every night. We're so grateful and appreciative to my parents' caregiver, Patricia Dell, who has gone above and beyond day after day, and to the bubbly and singing Betty Samuels. My father danced with them just last month at the Coats & Luke Golf Classic luncheon, singing and shuckling in his wheelchair with a huge smile. And thank you as well to Jaleesa, Susanna, and Juliet. You were all so special to my dad. As health issues grew, Dad's visits to the JGH became outings. He brought candies to the administrators, nurses, orderlies, and of course his beloved doctors. He not only remembered them all by name, they surely remembered him and his jovial personality and insatiable interest about their families and countries of origin and more. He formed bonds with so many healthcare professionals who treated him with compassion like family, and some of them became very close friends. And while Jody, the extraordinary and compassionate speech pathologist, delivered the sad news more than once that my dad would not eat my mouth for these past 5 years, he told her that he loved her for being so honest and considerate and always looking out for him. He would have loved the taste of just a single tomato. But instead, he resolved to stay safe by heeding Jody's wise advice. He was forever stubborn and determined to live a few extra years to dance with my mother at his grandchildren's weddings and celebrate his youngest grandson's bar mitzvah. He did it all and more, and was so happy and appreciative of the great fortunes of his life and for the people he met, including so many of you here and online today. Not too many people get to celebrate such a long life, so many milestones, a storied military career, family events, success in business, hundreds, if not thousands of relationships in good health, surrounded by all their sons remaining in Montreal and their families, so many members of their extended family, such a large group of close friends and good neighbors. My dad, my parents are a very loving and lucky couple to have enjoyed such fortune and happiness. George lived to the fullest and fulfilled his dreams. He got to do it all. In the last hours, he knew he would not be around to celebrate his 71st wedding anniversary with my mom tomorrow on September 15, only to discover that his very last day with us, amazingly, was indeed his anniversary date on the Hebrew calendar, the 16th day of the month of Elul. He achieved it all with zest, courage, determination, a lot of stubbornness, humor, and mostly with love. In his last moments with me, Judy, my mother, our kids, he hugged us all, proclaimed his never-ending love for his entire family, each by name, and said he had no regrets in life, was happy and at peace. He waited for my brothers, sisters-in-law, and grandchildren to share his love, and then he closed his eyes and he went to sleep. A life well lived. Dr. Seuss said, "Don't cry because it's over. Smile because it happened."
שיר למעלות, אשאנה אל ההרים, מאין יבוא עזרי. עזרי מעם אדוני עושה עושה שמיים וארץ. אל ייתן לעמוד רגליך, אל ינום שומרך. הנה לא ינום ולא יישן שומר ישראל. אדוני שומרך, אדוני צילך על יד ימינך. יומם השמש לא יככה, וירח בלילה. אדוני ישמורך מכל רע, ישמור את נפשך. אדוני ישמור צאתך ובואך מעתה ועד עולם.
Tehillim, Psalms of King David, chapter 121. A song of ascents. I shall raise my eyes to the mountains. From where will my help come? My help is from the Lord, the maker of heaven and earth. He will not allow your foot to falter. Your guardian will not slumber. Behold, the guardian of Israel will neither slumber nor sleep. The Lord is your guardian. The Lord is your shadow. He is by your right hand. By day, the sun will not smite you, nor will the moon at night. The Lord will guard you from all evil. He will guard your soul. The Lord will guard you going out and you coming in from now and to eternity. And now we will ask everybody to please rise, and we will recite the memorial prayer. Please.
אל מלא רחמים שוכן במרומים, המצא מנוחה נכונה תחת כנפי השכינה, במעלות קדושים וטהורים כזוהר הרקיע מאירים ומזהירים את נשמת ישראל בן אברהם שהלך לעולמו. בעבור שאנו מתפללים בעת אזכרת נשמתו בגן עדן, תהא מנוחתו. לכן בעל הרחמים יסתירהו בסתר כנפיו לעולמים, ויצר אור בצרור החיים את נשמתו. אדוני הוא נחלתו, וינוח בשלום על משכבו, ונאמר אמן.
Amen. O God, full of compassion, you who dwells on high, grant perfect rest between the sheltering wings of your presence, among the holy and pure who shine as the brightness of the firmament, under the soul of Yisrael ben Avraham, who has gone unto eternity, and in whose memory charity is offered. May his repose be in paradise. May the Lord of mercy bring him under the cover of his wings forever, and may his soul be bound in the bond of eternal life. May the Lord be his possession, and may his repose be in peace. Amen.
Amen.
We will ask the pallbearers to please come forward.